Welcome to a Dead Squirrel in the Woods Productions. This is a bonus content episode with me, your host, Nicholas. And thanks for listening. If you would like early access to the show on Monday instead of Friday, be sure to subscribe to our page on Spotify for $2.99 a month. Otherwise, we can be found on YouTube and iHeartRadio with new episodes premiering on Fridays. This week I'm going to talk about 3 more famous ships from Lake Superior. Now, this was meant to be a one episode thing. I had shorter notes for each ship from the ones last week and this week. And after recording the first episode originally the way it was, I was not happy with the quality of the information. I felt I could do more research and get a little more information. So this turned into a 2-parter. And I might come back to Lake Superior for future events and stuff. And definitely branch out to the rest of the Great Lakes as well. This is a very rich topic in information and events. There have been a lot of shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. So let's move on to some more tales from Lake Superior. So now let's dive into the ghost ships of Lake Superior. The first one is going to be the Emperor. This is a Canadian freight, and at the time, it was the largest freighter. The huge steel ore steamer was 525 feet long. She was built in 1910 by the Collingwood Shipping Company in Collingwood, Ontario. She was made of steel with an arch and a web frame to make an unbroken cargo hold that had hatches positioned every 12 feet. I would imagine this made it easier for loading, unloading of their load. There was some advancement in technology there. The construction was done in a way that created also lots of deck space in the middle of the ship. Now, even though she was launched in 1910, her first voyage was not until April 1911. Now, she was not a very lucky ship. She had a lot of bad trips and events in her time before her last trip on June 3rd, 1947. So I guess it would make sense to start maybe with her first voyage. Now, on this voyage, the main shaft broke at Thunder Bay, Ontario, and she had to be towed to Detroit for repairs. Also in 1911, she overrode the anchor while at the Solok, so causing a hole at the bottom, causing her to sink. Nothing fatal, but they were able to fix it. So that's not a very good start. So, within the first year, there were 2 major incidents. So very auspicious start for that ship. Now, in May of 1916, the Emperor was sold to a Canadian steamship lines. But, well, her misfortunes did not get any better. There were some minor incidents after the sale of the ship. One was in 1918 that resulted in the loss of a crew member that fell into the holding deck. She also ran aground in 1926 and in 1937. Also in 1936, she would lose her rudder on a trip. So, and the rudder is probably pretty important, so probably made that trip tough. On the night of June 3rd, 1947, excuse me, would be her last. The Emperor left Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, loaded with 10,429 tons of iron ore. At about midnight, the captain turned things over to the first mate, who was the one that oversaw the loading of the ship. And it is said that the Emperor sank due to fatigue of the steel. This is so, and this is what one of the theories is. Now, the first mate was the one who should have probably seen the signs of steel fatigue if they were overseeing the loading of the ship. But another factor was that the Emperor was off course as well, and this was due to the fatigue of the first mate. Seeing he did oversee the loading of the ship, and then not long after, that night he took over for the captain, so he was probably pretty tired himself. And this led to them getting off course. So around 4:15 on June 4th, she ran aground on the north side of Canoe Rocks. The ship sank within 30 minutes, and 12 crew members would die. This includes the captain and the first mate. The crew remaining would be rescued in about 30 minutes later, so they were pretty quick with the rescue mission. This wreck was a very big deal in the history of Thunder Bay. No salvage operations were conducted to this day. The wreck is intact, mostly damages to the bow. The wreck is a very popular place for divers, and they would have they would end up with some interesting tales. In 1988, one diver reported seeing a crewman lying back in his bunk. So this is probably the corpse of one or the image of one. Another came across a crewman working in the engine room, and there were noises of the engine running, which couldn't be possible. But others have reported a metallic sound saying "die, die." So it would seem by some of these reports that there is spirits there. Not sure how that works, but I don't know how you would explain them. But now, Peter Craven, the second mate, related his experience during the sinking. And this, he said, as the ship began to list sharply, the captain gave the order to abandon ship. The first boat was lowered and floated without too much of a trouble, and the men piled down the ropes to get in while others jumped into the water. I jumped in and managed to get in the second boat, but she was capsized by the suction of the sinking ship. Most of the missing were in or about the second boat. Down we went. When I came up, I reached the surface a moment before the boat came up and overturned. We were a wet, cold bunch as we waited for the rescue ships to reach us. I'm still shivering. Gee, that water was cold. And this came from a Port Arthur News article on June 4th, 1947. So right after he was interviewed. Now, Chief Engineer Mert Diedman, a 63-year-old veteran of 32 years on the Great Lakes, was awakened when the ship struck and told the following story to the press. I didn't have to have anyone tell me something seriously was wrong. I threw on my clothes and I went down to the engine room, listened as I ran down the passage. The engine started to race, and I knew then that the propeller was gone. It was a case of waiting with our fingers crossed until the captain gave the order to abandon ship. It wasn't long, about 10 minutes, I would say. Deadman got onto the starboard lifeboat and found himself up to his knees in water. We picked up several men in the water and cruised around until we were picked up by the U.S. Coast Guard. This also was a Port Arthur News Chronicle, I think. Yeah, Port Arthur News Chronicle of June 4th, 1947. Most likely the same article. Now, this one comes with a few stories as well, of first-hand accounts. So that is all I have for the Emperor. There is, if you're a diver, you could go and see this ship as well. So. Well, now that we have discussed the Emperor, let's move on to the SS Kamloops. Now, this is a Canadian lake freighter that was a part of the Canada steamship lines. She was not built over here, though. She was actually built in Hoverton Hill, Durham, England, by the Furness Shipbuilding Company for Steamships of Montreal, Quebec. That is Canada, of course. So, now, she was built smaller than other ships on the Great Lakes at the time, and this was more, and this was the 1920s, and this was more so she could fit through the canals of the lower Great Lakes. She was built in 1924 and was heavily used. And that was until December 7th, 1927. So she was heavily used for a short period of time. Now, the great place to start, I think, would be, let's go to December 1st, 1927. The Kamloops was discharged from Courtright, Ontario, captained by William Bryan and 21 other members of the crew. Now, after adding bagged salt to a mixture or a mixed load of tar, paper making machines, coiled wire, piping, shoes, a whole mixed load, right? Now, she would then go up Lake Huron on its way to Lake Superior. Now, they got there around December 4th. Unfortunately for the Kamloops and other ships on Lake Superior, there was a huge storm that hit on December 5th. She was last seen on December 6th, heading towards the southeastern shore of Isla Royale at about dusk. This was the last time she would be seen again for the next 50 years. Now, in December of 1928, a bottle was found at the mouth of the Agua River from an Alice Bartridge. She was a young assistant stewardess, and in it she wrote this: "I am the last one alive, freezing and starving to death on Isla Royale in Lake Superior. I just want my mom and dad to know my fate." Yeah. And for 4 years they had no clue what happened to their daughter. So now after 50 years of the Kamloops, for 50 years, the Kamloops was one of the famous ghost ships to inhabit Lake Superior. But she was finally discovered in 1977 on August 21st. And it was near Isla Royale, where she was last seen. This was done by a group of sports divers by carrying out a systematic search. She was found lying on her starboard side at the base of an underwater cliff. There are still human remains on the ship floating throughout the engine room. So this is basically the burial site for this crew. It seems that the harder it is to access a haunted location, the scarier the stories tend to be. And they don't get much creepier than that of Grandpa, a spirit haunting the submerged wreck of the SS Kamloops. Now, encounters have proven to be extra scary because he's not just any ghost. He inhabits a well-preserved corpse named Old Whitney. And he has remained trapped there for nearly a century, and he's still there. So you can dive and see this, and he's not the only one stuck on that ship. So there could be other spirits. But the one case is this well-preserved corpse of Old Whitney. Okay, now I have one more ship to talk about, and this one is the SS Edmund Fitzgerald. Now, this is the largest ship to sink on Lake Superior. She was an astounding 729 feet long. Now, she first was put into service in June of 1958, when she was a heavily used ship, carrying mostly iron ore all over the Great Lakes. And with her size, you would think she could carry a lot more than other ships. Now, she was built by the Great Lakes Engineering Company for the Northwestern Mutual Insurance Company for the cost of $8.4 million. Now, this is the most expensive price tag for a freighter ship at that time. This ship was named for the chairman of Northwestern Mutual, who had a big footprint in the shipping industry in the Great Lakes. His grandfather was a ship captain on the lake, and his father owned a shipyard. Both his father and grandfather had ships named after them as well. So you can imagine, with her size, the Edmund Fitzgerald would have been a well-known ship on the Great Lakes. It would really be tough to miss her, right? Well, over the years, it picked up a few monikers, such as the Queen of the Great Lakes. Also, the Toledo Express, because it shipped out of Toledo a lot. And it was also known as the Titanic of the Great Lakes. Now, I don't know if you want to be known as a Titanic. Of course, we know what happened to the Titanic. So, yeah, not a good thing. But her final voyage started on November 9th, 1975, from Superior, Wisconsin. And she was captained by Ernest McSorley. They departed around 2:30 p.m. and they were joined by the Arthur Anderson, with the Fitzgerald taking the lead. It could go faster, so it kind of took the lead. The ships were aware of the storm coming and agreed that, well, they'd go around it mostly by taking a more northern course across Lake Superior. Now, weather changes, and as the conditions continued to intensify, a gale warning was issued at 7 p.m. that night. The conditions were wind gusts of 50 knots and seas of 12 to 16 feet high. But both ships, they've piloted through worse, they've pushed through worse. So a few days after she sank, reports of sightings came in. She was said to be seen off the coast of Whitefish Point, Michigan, where ironically, this is where the Great Lakes Museum is located today. And this was also after she had been known to have sank. So there was images of her there. And yeah. But also in 1985, a commercial vessel reported seeing the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, but that's not possible because that's 10 years later, and she was at the bottom of the lake in two pieces. So I'm sure there's other sightings. I could not find any other sightings, but the most intriguing thing to me was there were images of her where they built the Great Lakes Museum. Yeah, and also, with this, some also say that the Fitzgerald had a cursed first launch and christening, so it already had a rough start. So in 1958, when she was built, the wife of Edmund Fitzgerald was the one asked to break the champagne bottle to christen the ship. Well, this was a disaster from the beginning. It took her 3 tries to break the bottle, which is very superstitious to sailors. So that's not a good start. But now, alright, so now she has to ship off, right? Well, they had trouble removing the keel blocks. But now, on top of it, the icing on this cake of a eventful launch, she would crash in to the harbor or the pier, causing a man to suffer a heart attack, and he would eventually pass away from the heart attack. So it's not a very good start. Yeah, it's not the start you really want. But one witness said it was as if the ship was trying to climb out of the water. So to add to the ghost lore, this ship sank so fast that no one was able to get off the ship before it sank. To add to that, no bodies have been recovered to this day. It's actually banned to go to that. You can't dive there anymore. So 29 crew members, the 29 crew still is with that ship. That is their grave. So who knows what kind of hauntings are there now, but we would never know now because nobody can go there. So a former Air Force and federal employee of 30 years, Nikki Jackson, has had her own supernatural connection with the Fitz. And this is kind of a weird one, but we covered this kind of thing before with another sinking. But all her life, she says she's experienced visions or dreams of events before they occur. Well, in this case, she saw on October 21st, 1975, of a ship in peril in an intense storm. She saw the ship perish in the storm, and she saw it sink. Now, the name of the ship she claims that was on, or the name that was on the ship, is none other than the Edmund Fitzgerald. Now, there is also some more interesting facts with this. A Gordon Lightfoot, a Canadian singer, who he released about 10 albums from 1966 to 1975. Well, he was inspired to write a ballad called The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald after reading an article in Newsweek. So he included the song on his 1976 album Summertime Dream. And this is a nearly 6-minute single. And this is his second most successful hit. It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 that year. The third verse begins this way. The tale in the wires made of a telltale sound. The wind in the wires made a telltale sound. When the wave broke over the railing, and every man knew, as the captain did too, 'twas the witch of November come stealin'. Gordon Lightfoot, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Now, all right, what caused her to sink? Well, that's a very good question. So, there's plenty of theories out there, as any sinking there is. They go as far as to aliens. Some think there is a Bermuda Triangle in the Great Lakes. And as you're going to find out next week, we're going to talk about a Bermuda Triangle type thing in the Great Lakes on Lake Michigan. But this happened in Lake Superior, so I don't know that there is a Superior Triangle, but yeah. Now, but there are some other very more plausible ones. And as I say these, it could be a multiple of these that were ultimately the demise of the Fitzgerald. The first one, she had a faulty hatch that led to a massive flooding. And that's very possible. She had a sudden hatch failure, letting a rush of water on board. Now, a faulty hatch could have led to a sudden hatch failure. So, the hull took a severe blow from a shawl, which is a low point in the water. They were overloaded. Maybe they tried to get more on than they were able to safely. The ship had structural damage. Overloading could cause structural damage. And the last one is the ship was pushed under by waves. Well, this could also go with overloading. She could have been sitting lower in the water if she was overloaded. So it could be one or multiple. Now, to conclude with this, the Fitzgerald has a Remembrance Day on November 10th every year, where at this Remembrance Day, they have a memorial ceremony that takes place, and they ring a bell 29 times to honor and remember the crew. And then They also ring it one more time for the over 30,000 lost on the Great Lakes. So when you're out on Lake Superior, keep a lookout. There may be a ghost ship sailing with you. And this also goes for the Great Lakes in general. There's been many shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. There's many storms. When we talk about Lake Michigan next week, me and my sister, we'll go into that too. There's some weird happenings there as well. So, and if you're interested, you can find this Gordon Lightfoot song probably on Apple Music, anywhere that has music, or this has been a Dead Squirrel in the Woods Productions. This was edited by me, Nicholas, and thank you for listening. And be sure to check us out on our socials. Follow us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button to be notified. And we are also on Facebook, and we have a website. We also have a subscription option for $2.99 on Spotify to get access to the show on Mondays instead of on Friday when they normally would drop. Hope to have you back for future episodes.